Hey guys, today we have the Penn 4200 SS that we're going to break down and then put back together. First I'll start with the spool, pop that off, hit the handle real quick. This handle is a one-piece handle so it doesn't come off. Let's go ahead and break the spool down. We'll remove the drag cover. Gotta hold this down to unscrew this because that'll turn. Note the way these the drag is assembled. This one looks to be incorrect. Yeah, they have the metal drag washer on top of the spring, and the way it should be is the reverse. Should be like this, with the spring going on top of it. Then obviously you have the Teflon washer underneath, and that just sits in the grooves on this area right here. You can go ahead and remove the thrust washer. This is a one-piece assembly, so it doesn't come apart. Let's go ahead and get the clip spring out. Note the way it's assembled, so that when you put it back together, you'll know how it goes. With the click assembly, there's normally you would have a washer or a relief. This one doesn't have that. It just simply sets in because the spring is built in. It's a plastic spring. So obviously over time this will start to go. And that's it for the spool. Next, we'll go ahead and remove the three side screws or side plate screws. Looks pretty clean inside. Let's go ahead and pop this bearing out of this side plate. Since it's graphite, it's not that shouldn't be that difficult to pop out, but sometimes you just never know. And you want to support inside of the frame or inside the side plate, not on the outside, because it's graphite, so you can obviously break it if you push too hard against it. I'll check the bearing real quick. Sounds fine. Let's go ahead and pull out the main spring. Now what you'll notice on this is there's a catch spring here. You can see that. That catch spring hits the dog, which is what engages it or disengages it depending on what you do with the lever here. So I'm going to remove this dog now. Leave the spring on there for a sec. I know it sits just like this in the reel. Sits like that. Seems a little scary, but it's not. It's pretty easy to put back together. I'm removing the bushing or the spacer washer that goes inside the dog. And let's go ahead and get this. We'll take the spool shaft out and then remove the rotor. Just pulls right out. Now we can pop off this plastic crosswind block. Then we can go ahead and get the crosswind out. And I'll go ahead and pop off the rotor now. Now this should just come right up. I'm noticing a little bit of rust here, so it might be stuck. Just kind of wiggle it with a little bit of force. Not too much because you don't want to break anything, but you have to get it off. Looks okay. Then we'll go ahead and remove this bearing cover. Pop this other bearing out. Check it really quickly. Sounds fine as well. And to remove this pinion gear and bearing, there is a retaining wire, or retaining spring in there. Okay, we're back. I had to give in and go and get some hooks to pop it out. So basically the way I did it is, and I'm not going to recreate it because it still takes a little bit of patience and time, is that's set in there like that. I pried or positioned one hook against one edge, and then use this hook, second hook, to pop the spring out and up. It does take some patience, but you have to get it out if you want to remove the pinion and the bearing with everything else there. So off with the bearing, just checking it. Spins fine, sounds good. Remove the sleeve. Next we'll remove the dog, which just sits on top of the pinion gear. Always take note of how they come off. This is a keyed dog, so it only goes on one way. To the side. And we're almost done with this. We'll remove this weight. Just taking note of the sides of the screws that you're and where they're coming from. And then we'll finally remove this lever. And what I'm looking for is a pin, but we don't have one here. So let me check the schematic on this really quickly. Okay, we're back. All right, so basically what you need to do for this, since it's just a one-piece item, is just gently turn this, because it's going to just pop right out like that. To set it back in, you simply push it in and twist, and then it locks into place. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. The rotor and the bail assembly. Go down, do these side screws. I just loosen everything up and use my micro tools to do the rest, depending how tight it is. Okay, Okay, so I'm gonna leave this for now. I'll leave it to the last, and then I'll remove everything else. One thing you want to note is on a lot of these spinning reels for the pens, if they have two screws, the aluminum screw or the matte screw goes under the line roller, and the shiny screw goes on the other side of the arm. Pop these off. Hold it for a second. I'll go ahead and do the spring cover. Pop that off. Spring looks fine. Feels fine. And now for this side, I'll hold the cover while I unscrew this. The reason is because there's a spring in there that just kind of pops out sometimes. So you have to gently remove this cover and then hold down onto this end piece here, the metal piece. Gently down, slide your finger down, and you're looking for this trip lever right here. And just pop it off. If it does spring off, sometimes it'll fly away and you'll need to replace it. Alright, so I'll pop off this arm, and then I'll go ahead and pry this gently up so the spring doesn't fly off. And that's that for the rotor. Let's go ahead and remove the line roller. Inspect the lock washer. Looks fine. The line roller guide, or the line roller piece on this side looks fine. Pull up the line roller. This one does not have a bushing. The 420 does not have a bushing, so let's check to see if this one does. It does not. And that's essentially how you break down a 4200 Penn 4200 SS spinning reel. Come back in a sec after we clean this up and then show you how to put it back together. Okay, so we're back. Let's get this 4200 SS put back together again. I think what I'll do is I'll start with the rotor and the bale assembly. Part of this can be a little tricky, which is the trigger here. So I'll show you how to put that in. Okay. So what I'll start with is this piece down here, which is the trigger for the bale release. There's a little groove inside here that you want to set one end of the spring inside. Just rest it in there like that. Then take this piece. There's a groove on one side. Set that groove inside the hook at the end of the spring. Just like that. Then you're going to take a small screwdriver, raise it slightly, and turn it so that it's facing upright, like that. Find your washer for this piece, set that on there, and set your other end on top of that, just like so. Now I'll take a little bit of oil, a very small amount, and just drop that on there just to help it move. But I don't put any oil on the spring. take your cover, position it on top while holding the bottom piece, because what you're essentially doing is you want to make sure that this is set to the right of this arm here. So this is what's going to disengage the bail when the trigger hits the rotor. Slide it right over the piece, and before you screw it down, just make sure you have it set properly. It should flick back, which means it's working properly. When you flick it back, the trigger sticks out. When it hits the bail or the rotor, it flicks it back in like that, which pops the bail over. Lock this down. Not necessarily too tight, but once you tighten it down, double check to make sure it's still working properly, and it is. Then we'll go to the other side. Let's get our bail arm and our screws. Even for graphite, I will still take a little piece of, or a little dab of grease before I stick it inside the hole to set it. Set it in place like that. Then essentially what's going to happen is the bail arm is going to sit on top of it just like that. We'll put together the line rotor mechanism, and I'll add a little bit of grease to this section here. I prefer grease over oil because it helps it doesn't dissipate in water, it just kind of stays there. And since most of these reels are used on salt water, or the ones that I work on, it's more beneficial to use grease over oil. Now take the bail arm, pop this lock washer or lock nut in there. Stick the screw through, set the line roller washer on top, like so. Then do a balancing act while I screw it in gently. Don't lock it down, just leave it a little loose. It'll tighten it up at the end. Now I'll go ahead and put in this side of the bail arm. There's a rounded edge on one side and a flat surface on the other. I put the flat surface face down onto the rotor. This one I think I'll put a little bit of grease on the tip. Again, that's just to help for movement, or to aid in the movement of the spring inside this piece of the bail arm. And again, as I said, the silver part goes on this side and the aluminum screw goes on the other side under the line roller. I don't lock anything down yet. I'm just getting it sitting in there so that it doesn't fall out or shoot out on me. Then I'll go ahead and grease the spring. Then we can put the cover on in a sec. Let's get that. Okay, so next step we'll go ahead and get the other end of it secured. And that just kind of sits in place. Just like that, just center it over the screw or the hole and attach it. Something like that. Now we can put the cover on. Now we can go ahead and lock all the screws down. You don't want to over tighten these things, but you do want them snug. And for the line roller, it's a balancing act. You want to have it tight, but not too tight where the line roller doesn't spin. Having the grease there aids in being able to tighten this down pretty snug and having the line roller spin properly anyhow. It's a little bit too tight, so I'm gonna back it up a sec, just a notch. That's better. It's a lot better. Okay. Next we'll jump onto this bad boy here. This seems difficult, but it's really not that difficult. And what I'm referring to is the dog mechanism on this. I'm going to get the crosswind gear put in place first. And then we'll work on the dog assembly and the main gear. I don't typically put a lot of grease on these because these are light tackle. Just a light coating of grease on these things. Let's get the bearing stuck in there. Get that set in place. Add a little bit of oil to the bearing. That'll work its way in when we get the main gear in. Go ahead and drop the crosswind gear in place. Make sure that knob or that notch there is set down so you can get the block in. I'm going to go ahead and put in the lever. For the lever, there's two different lengths on them. This shorter end is going to face outward, away from the crosswind gear. Stick it in sideways at first, then twist it in place. Then you're set. Okay, let's go ahead and stick on this just to show you how it goes on. This is the spring that sits on top of the main gear, and this is the trigger that engages and disengages the dog on this reel. I'm gonna grease this up. So the spring itself faces up away from the main gear. There's a little groove inside the main gear that you just sit this inside of. Just pops right over it and sits just like that. That little hole right there you see is going to help us line the catch mechanism for the dog. Okay, let's go ahead and set the dog in place. That's how it sits. Just like that. Put it over the bushing or the support. Rest it up on top of the hole. This is where if you have smaller fingers, it actually helps a lot, right? Then just go ahead and screw that in. next we'll go ahead and get the pinion set. Then after that's done, we'll go ahead and get this main gear set in place. I don't put grease inside these holes. I'll put oil, and that's to help the main shaft not get sticky on you. On with the dog first. It gets set on this way, not this way. Next is the sleeve, then the wash, then the bearing. A little oil on top. Then we can just set that in here. I'm going to add a little bit of grease down here just for the inside of this groove where the pinion sits. So essentially what's going to happen is when you put this main gear in and it engages the dog will sit like this, and your anti-reverse will act or will function like this. When this is set up, and disengaging the dog, this is what will happen. It'll sit like that, and you can go forward and backward. All right, let's get the clip to set this bearing in so it doesn't come flying out. Just take one end, find the groove, and then push it into place. Like so. Okay. Okay, let's get this main gear set in there, and then we can work on getting the rotor attached. I have the end of this spring through the eye hole so I can see where to place that notch between the groove on the dog. Even with that, it's not easy to see. So but you'll know if you have it or not. Right there. I'm pretty sure we got it. Yep, we got it. I can always remove this and replace it. So we're not going to worry about this right now. All right, so next I'll go ahead and get the rotor on top, and then put the shaft in with the crosswind block. Again, this is plastic, so you don't need a lot of grease or anything. I'm just putting some grease on the bottom where it touches the crosswind gear, just to light them out. Set that in place, like so. Then we'll go ahead and get this the rotor on top of the reel, so we can finish everything up. On with this washer, and then screw it down. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get this main shaft in there. I add oil to the shaft itself. And what I normally do is just add a little bit of grease to where it meets the crosswind block. I still add a grease here because there's a nut that goes through, or a screw that goes through there, which can be susceptible to corrosion. You're just lining it up and you're trying to get it into the groove. And the way it's going to sit is just like that. The rounded side down and the flat side up. You can also do this before you put the main gear on. And I might actually have to take it out because the screws, yep, I'll have to take it out anyhow. I need to access this so I can put the screw in. Okay, a little bit of grease on top of this gearing, top of the main gear. Now we can close this up. Let's pop that bearing in and go ahead and get this set. Okay, onto the spool. The click mechanism. There's a little knob there that we want to set inside of this hole, just like so. Then the screw goes in on top of that. So I'm just going to hold it down and roll it over, then screw it in. Let's go ahead and get this quick release. A little bit of oil. Add the thrust washer. Set it on top of the shaft till it locks in there, and it's locked. Get the spool, stick it on top. Clicker works, which is good. These Teflon washers don't need, drag washers don't need grease, so we just set that in place. Set the keyed washer on top of the Teflon washer. If we can find it. Then the spring. Next, the drag knob. Then add a little bit of oil to the handle. Here. A little bit here. And some to the knob part. And put it on, test out the reel. And let's see if we have this. Yep, it falls down. So we're gonna fix this lever here, or replace it. Even though a lot of people don't use manual reverse, for these smaller reels, especially if you're going after big game on the flats or something, you might want it. So if you're using like a live bait or something, you might need it. So it's there, we'll get it fixed. There's the bail. You're missing it, hold on. And it works properly. Alright guys, thanks for watching.